on a Cold Winter Night by Darkside Silver. Chapter 2 by a Warm Roaring Fire. Notes: this is the one chapter with violence in it, so be warned. Blood and injury, and also kind of disassociation a little, I think. On to the chapter. It was bright, too loud. Sparkling lights strung up on the trees, music playing through the streets, laughter and joyous conversations echoing through the air. Even so late, even in the dark of the night, the noise continued. A monster stalked through the forest, unsteady, unstable, one eye twitching, flickering from shadow to shadow, constricting against bright light reflecting on icy snow. One clawed hand caught on the trunk of a tree and gouged through it. Someone was nearby. Someone was trudging through the snow, footsteps heavy, crunching loudly, cursing as a foot slipped. The monster prowled towards it, tail lashing, vision still half blurred, narrowing down, honing in on the sound. Its ears twitched. The someone had stopped. It could see him now, tall and slender, elegantly featured, with soft white hair and crimson eyes that blurred with a rage that he found the monster's grave. All that rage vanished as he saw the monster. Avid? Scott stared across the clearing. Surely not. It couldn't be. That scrawny young man, dusky brown hair, sharp purple eyes, long pointed ears, one arm and half his face dredged in shadows. A thin black horn jutted up from his forehead on the same side, that one arm ended in thick, sharp claws. Scott took a step back. The creature, Avid. No, not Avid. It couldn't be Avid. Avid was dead. He was gone. He was 200 years gone. It stepped closer, staggered, keeled sideways, and landed on three limbs. That clawed hand carving grooves into the snow. A whip-thin tail lashed behind it, barbed end glinting dangerously in the moonlight. Then it lunged, screeched like a feral animal, and leapt for Scott's neck. He yelled, skittering backwards, ducking under it and rolling as it crashed into the ground behind him. He shunted himself sideways as it leapt again, landing hard and letting out a low, guttural growl. The vampire stood, backing away again, panting hard, winded despite not needing breath. Mind racing, chest aching, eyes beginning to burn, because this was Avid. Even if it wasn't, it was him, his face, his eyes, him. It lunged at him again, and this time struck. A burst of burning pain stabbed through Scott's shoulders as its claw raked across his skin. Blackish blood splattering the snow, and the vampire fell, crashing down into it. The creature, whatever it was on him again in an instant. A scream ripped from his lungs as its claws dug deep into his other shoulder. He swung his free arm, slashed across its nose. Dark blood spattered his face, and the creature snarled. Brought its other arm down hard on his wrist, a sharp crack echoing out as Scott screamed again. He heard a crackle up above him. The monster was grinning, sharp teeth glinting, tears glistening in his eyes. Avid? Scott tried, cut off by another cry as its claws twisted deeper into his flesh. He could taste blood in the back of his throat. He strained against it, one arm pinned, the other going numb as it tore downwards through his flesh, drawing out another pained scream. Panic spiked through him, phantom heartbeats pounding in his ears. Breath hitched in his throat, vision blurring, head spinning, burning pain as claws tore through him as easily as though prey. And that monster, the creature, looming over him, tearing into him so gleefully. That was Avid's smile on his face. That was Avid's voice it laughed with. That was Avid. His arm was freed, its hand coming away, reaching down, pressing into his neck, claws curling into his skin, catching at the scars on the side of it. He reached up, squinting through the encroaching darkness, fighting through burning agony, shooting through every nerve in his body. He reached up, touched his face, cupped Avid's cheek in his hand. The creature stopped. The pressure around his throat eased. The claws curled into his flesh, loosened. Just enough for Scott to pull himself up. Just enough for him to reach and plant a kiss on Avid's lips. Before his energy gave out, and his body went limp in the snow. What was he doing? What was he doing? What happened? What? Scott? Avid's throat burned at the effort to speak. Blood had melted the snow around him. A puddle of dark black red soaked his clothes, his skin. He could taste it on his tongue, sweet and refreshing. He watched it soak down from the body under him. Deep gashes across his chest and shoulders, ragged and red and darkening rapidly. Bruises around his neck, a crook in his wrist that rapidly turned dark purple and crimson. Avid stumbled away, falling backwards into the snow. His heart faltered, pounding in his chest. It shouldn't be doing that. That wasn't right. His own hands were coated in Scott's blood, dark and red and clawed, his left hand darker than his right, engulfed by shadow, scarred and bleeding and tipped in thick black claws. His breath hitched, his heart dropping. What happened? Scott? He asked again, his voice a hoarse whisper, failing him as tears began to burn his eyes and fall down his cheeks. He crawled closer. Scott didn't move, didn't stir. How could he? His arm almost torn off at the shoulder. His chest ripped open, his stomach gouged through. He was dead. But he was a vampire. He was an elder. Surely something so weak couldn't have killed him. Surely not. No, he was alive. He would come back. He had to come back. Avid brushed his hair back, ran his human hand down the vampire's face, ice cold to the touch. Where was he? He looked around. A grave stood in the small clearing, his own name etched into it. The other way, he could see light, distant, dim, glowing on a hilltop. The castle. Hold on, please. I'm sorry, please. Through tears, he forced out the words, hoping Scott could still hear him. He slid his hands under the vampire's limp body and lifted him. I'm so sorry, please, just a little while. Hold on, please, I'm sorry. They stopped meaning anything after a while, mumbling between sobs and hiccups and trying not to hurt him any more as he stumbled through this thick snow. The castle was lively, bright golden glow from the lanterns and colours of the Christmas tree glowing from inside the ballroom, beaming out of the tall windows that lined the wall. Shelby spun drift around again, dipping her low as the song came to a close. The other three gave a polite applause from their seats on the carpet, and the two vampires stood up and bowed. Encore! Pearl laughed, getting shoved lightly by Cleo. No, enough, it's late, the older vampire purred, though they didn't sound convinced by their own words. We're vampires! We don't need to sleep. Come on, get another song going. Pearl jumped up to her feet, already making for the speaker before anyone could stop her. Abolish stood as well, stretching. No, Cleo's right, it's late, and I, at least, actually do need to sleep, so if you wouldn't mind. Pearl pattered, whining dramatically, but she turned off the speaker anyway. Shelby chuckled a little, as much as they loved the party, the dancing, the games they had been playing. It had gotten late, and although vampires didn't need to sleep, she still liked to. It was a good way to regain energy when blood wasn't available. Cleo stood and joined Pearl, wrapping their arms around her middle and resting their head on her shoulder in comfort. Abolish had already walked off, disappeared upstairs to one of the several guest bedrooms. Drift had started to work on cleaning up, and Scott. Where was Scott? Shelby swiveled in place, scanning the ballroom. She spotted a half-drunk glass of wine left at the end of one bench and frowned. It wasn't like him to leave drinks lying around, especially not expensive ones. She left the ballroom, scanning the entryway. His coat was gone off the rack, so was Abolish's scarf, and Scott had mentioned wanting a new one. Shelby just sighed, running a hand down her face and reaching to grab her own coat. She swung the doors open to the beginnings of a blizzard, a harsh flurry of snow pelting the side of her face and dusting the inside of the castle before she could pull the door shut again. She raised her arms against it, squinting through the haze of snowflakes. She could hardly see the distant lights lining the road. She almost missed the shadow lumbering towards her. They thought it was a trick of the light at first. The shadow moving closer through the snow had a tail, long a whip long, whip thin, tipped in sharp barbs and a point, and a single horn jutting up 2 inches or so from its forehead. It looked uncannily familiar, the shape of its hair, its eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness, an awfully similar shade of violet to Shelby? Abbott's voice carried across the bridge, clear and sharp through the howling wind. Shelby! Her throat tightened. She squinted again. The shadow drew near, and sure enough, there he stood. Tears frosted to his cheeks, blood coating his clothes, his hands, his face, and in his arms was Scott's limp body. Abolish worked quickly. He was unfortunately quite familiar with the wounds scoring through Scott's flesh, deep, ragged claw marks left by a hunting monster. His own scars ached across his shoulders as he treated each wound. 60 years ago, he had a run in with a similarly shadow draped creature, not different to Avid now. A woman turned roughly 140 years ago, about the time he would have arrived in Oakhurst. She was a monster hunter at one point, renowned, revered even by some in the organization, until she lost her mind. The infection was slow, but it was devastating when it finally took effect. Avid's seemed to have started at his throat. 3 distinct black scars ran across his neck, down and over his collarbone, lighter than the black shadow that grew over parts of his skin, with a recognizable purple hue. The left side of his face, his entire left arm, and a good portion of his back had been affected. The fact that he was cognizant was nothing short of a miracle. He was sat in the same room, one of the guest bedrooms on the castle's second floor, eyes fixed on Abolish as he worked. The beacon he had summoned sat between them, a protective warmth emanating from it, a barrier between Abolish and the monster barely a few feet away. He was prepared. He had a dagger tucked away on his belt, and another hidden under his sleeve, and 4 anxious vampires pacing the hallway outside. He had insisted on working alone, but not even 5 of them could pry the demon away from its prey. Abolish was just glad Avid was being quiet. Vampires didn't typically leave behind bodies when they died, unless they were staked, which Scott hadn't been. Avid wasn't sapient enough to think of that clearly, so the lack of decay on Scott's body was a worrying sign. When a vampire was killed, their corpse was supposed to wither away within the hour, rotting like any other body would, just at rapid pace. He snapped the thread on the last stitch, stepping away. Avid shifted. Abolish's hand went immediately to the dagger on his belt, but the demon wasn't looking at him. Its eyes were fixed on Scott, expectant. He's not going to just wake up, Abolish huffed, letting his hand fall away from his weapon. You've done enough damage to kill him for good here. I don't know what you're expecting. Avid flinched at his words, then shrank away, huddling down and drawing his knees up to his chest. He looked almost pitiful. Abolish sighed, softening his voice. He'll regenerate eventually. You can't really kill a vampire with anything but a wooden stake. It's just going to be a while. The demon shifted in place again, looking uncertainly between the two. Tears. I wasn't trying to. I know. Abolish raised a hand, cutting him off. Do you know what you are? Avid blinked, tail flicking. He looked at his hands, flexing his claws, then looked back up and shook his head. You're a demon, Avid. That's the simplest thing to call it. He caught a slight shift, a shudder running through the boy's body. If you're not careful, you lose yourself to your new instincts. You'll turn further. That, he pointed to the shadows clinging to his skin, will spread. You won't be able to think beyond hunting. Avid shuddered again, shrinking in on himself. And unfortunately, most demons go for the people familiar to them. He glanced back at Scott, still unconscious on the bed. I didn't mean to, Avid whimpered. Abolish just sighed again. I know, this isn't your fault. It sort of was, but Avid didn't need to know that. You were acting on instinct. You weren't in control. Avid sniffled, wiping his face. Tears had started rolling down his cheeks. Abolish sighed again. He was too old and too emotionally inept for this. You can stay with him, he offered. Avid immediately perked up. I'm leaving the beacon there. It'll alert me if you get any closer. He stepped closer, crouching to eye level with the demon. Do not touch him. You stay right where you are, and you do not move. Got it? Avid nodded, and Abolish stood up again, leaving the room. He had to immediately grab Shelby by the collar to stop her from barging past him. No, no, let me go. She squirmed against him, but he held fast, shutting the door and sending her stumbling backwards into Drift's arms. Drift reacted quickly, wrapping her arms around Shelby's middle and holding her in place. What happened? How's Scott? Is he... He's fine. Probably. Abolish shrugged, finally taking off his bloody gloves. Clea cocked her head at him. Probably? They echoed, crossing their arms. Abolish shrugged. Shelby lunged at him. He hit the wall hard, lifted off the ground by his shirt collar. What the fuck do you mean? Probably, she raged, eyes blazing. Shelby, he was mauled by a demon. What do you expect? I don't know if he'll survive or not. Apparently raising his voice was all it took, as Shelby dropped him and stepped back, looking shaken. And you left the demon in the room with him? Cleo came forwards then, seething, stopped only by Pearl stepping between them. I'm sure there's a reason. There's a reason, right? She looked back at him over her shoulder. Abolish fixed his shirt, adjusting it until it sat nicely again, then huffed out a breath. I still have my mini beacon from the whole debacle and curse the first time. It acts as a barrier of sorts. Avid won't be able to get anywhere near Scott. Why is he still in there to begin with? Shelby's voice pitched, stressed. Drift was holding her again, though that wasn't likely to do anything. You try separating them then. Go ahead, get Avid out. See how well that goes for you. He tried to keep his voice level, though he couldn't help the sharpness that edged his tone. He wasn't here on business. He didn't have to keep his attitude calm. He took a deep breath, calming himself. I've dealt with demons before. Once they attach to someone, you can't separate them. I've tried. The scars on his shoulder twinged slightly at the mention, but it seemed to finally calm the vampires down. Shelby relaxed into Drift's hold, leaning into her, and Cleo turned and marched away to cool off on her own. Pearl followed them, both disappearing at the end of the hall. There's nothing more to do. Either Scott regenerates, or he dies and revives back in New York. Either way, he'll be fine. He tried to sound reassuring, but he honestly wasn't certain himself. He lingered outside that room for a long moment, watching the girls disappear into a room of their own. It hurt, the idea of losing Scott. It hurt more than he had expected it to. The anxiety tightening in his throat as he worked had come as a surprise. He was attached, despite only really having a few fleeting interactions with the man over the decades. He had used a new name every time, and clearly Scott hadn't caught on, but Abolish had plenty of time to grow attached to the vampire. He shook his head, pushing off the wall. It was late, nearly 2 in the morning. He knew in his heart. He knew Avid wouldn't actually hurt Scott again. Not yet, at least. For the night, Scott was safe. He reminded himself of that. Was he let the beacon return to him, disappearing into the stone on his hearing. He reminded himself again as he left the hallway, returning to his own guest bedroom, and collapsed hard onto the bed. It was warm in the castle. The wind howled outside, sending down snow in hard sheets that covered the forest, the roads, the ice on the lakes. But it was warm inside the castle. It was quiet, save for the distant rustling of trees and the churning of the river, and the crackling of a fireplace across the small bedroom. Avid watched the flames for a long time. He could hear Shelby yelling in the hallway. He heard Abolish yell back, then Cleo, then hard footsteps and the distant sound of a door slamming. They were fighting, because of him. And then the beacon went out, vanished, a trail of golden light zipping away across the carpet and out under the door. Avid stared after it for a long moment. The snow fell, the wind howled, the fire continued to crackle. The whole castle smelled faintly of wine and cinnamon. The room still smelled like blood. It made Howard's stomach growl, and he pulled his knees closer to his chest. The walls were decorated with landscape paintings: the lake, the obelisk, the hills, and the other forest. And the forest. The wallpaper itself was a soft cream colour, with floral patterns running up and down it, like flowering vines climbing the walls. Two small armchairs sat in front of the fire, a circular table between them. A bookshelf ran half the length of the wall. A small table sat in the opposite corner, with an empty vase sat atop it. The floor was carpeted, soft dark blue. Abbott ran a hand through it, trying to ignore the growing ache in his gut. He ran his tongue over his teeth. He had grown a second set of fangs on the outer sides of the first, and a matching set on his lower teeth. There weren't any mirrors in the room, which made sense, considering vampires lived there. He reached a hand up, touching his ears, long and pointed. He could move them like a cat's, flicking them backwards to lie almost flat against the sides of his head. He flexed his shadowed hand again, retracting the claws, then letting them slide out again. He flicked his tail, dragged it along the carpet, then curled the end. 3 small barbs sat along the top of it, just below the arrow-headed tip, twitching as he flexed them. He reached up and ran his clawed hand up the horn. It was only small and thin, maybe an inch or two tall, if even that. He had another, even small, mostly hidden by his hair on the right side. He tried to cover them both, resting his hands at their bases. He curled his tail around himself, wrapping it around his waist. He could hide it there, if he needed to. His stomach growled again. He winced, uncoiling his tail and wrapping his arms around his middle. The air still smelled like blood. He licked his lips and swallowed hard, scanning the room for anything to distract himself. But he wasn't supposed to move. But the beacon was gone. No one would know. His stomach growled again, painfully loud. He bit his tongue, then stood. Scott was still motionless. Several long slashes marred his skin, stitched up now and highlighted by an angry red where a silver needle had pricked him. He looked as though he were sleeping. Abbott crept closer. He stopped at the foot of the bed, staggered over, and caught himself on the edge of the mattress. Something awful twisted in his stomach. His vision started to blur. He was very aware of the sound of blood flowing slowly through long dead veins. He hunched over, twisting his claws into the bed sheet, ears flickering, alert. Tears stunned his eyes as they flicked unwittingly towards the unmoving body, hardly a few feet away. He felt his claws slide out and curled them into the sheets. His mouth started watering. His mind drifted, unbidden, back to the feeling of blood coasting his claws, fresh on his skin in the frigid winter air. He bit hard on the inside of his mouth, feeling blood burst against his tongue, sickeningly sweet, eyes still fixed on the body. Looking at me like I'm a meal. A light, teasing voice broke its way into his mind. Soft, tired, a little hoarse, but unmistakable. His eyes focused again. Scott had propped himself up on his elbows, smirking despite the faint trail of blood running from the corner of his mouth. "You miss me that much?" he asked, his voice breaking. There were tears in his eyes. Everett stepped away. Scott sat up fully, hurt flashing in his eyes for a moment. His smile softened as he leaned back against the headboard, wincing as the stitches tugged his skin. I know you didn't mean it. It's all right. His voice was still light, but the teasing lilt was gone. His eyes were soft, gleaming in the firelight, that same warm crimson Avard had once feared. They were gentle, friendly even. His smile wavered, a tear ran down his face, quickly wiped away. I missed you, he choked out, voice hitching. Avard's heart twisted. He inched closer, forcing his claws away. Sorry, this isn't. I don't know what's wrong with me. Scott forced out a laugh, trying to wipe away the tears now falling down his face. Don't apologize. Don't apologize, Avard gasped. Something must have happened, something awful for Scott, of all people, to be crying. How long has it been? How long ago was he? I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. He rushed forwards, dropping onto the bed. He wanted to hug him, to hold him, to beg for forgiveness. Instead, Scott grabbed him, pulled him closer, arms around his shoulders, and sobbed into his neck. Avard froze for a moment. For a long, painful moment, he wasn't sure what to do, until he felt Scott start to pull away. He reacted on instinct, wrapping his arms around the other's middle, and pulling him closer. Scott leaned back in, barely stifling another harsh sob, clinging to him almost desperately. Avard held on just as tightly, moving one hand up to cradle Scott's head. However long it had been, he'd clearly missed a lot. He had been missed a lot. Tears were rolling down his own face before long. He twisted into Scott's shoulder, doing his best not to tremble. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Muffled words shared, unclear which of them said it more. A long moment, quiet crying, clinging to one another for what felt like both an eternity and hardly a blink, before Scott pulled back again, trying to dry his eyes. He broke into a breathless laugh, one hand still around the back of Avard's neck. Oh gods, I hate this. He was still shaking, tears still glistening on his skin, but he was now smiling. A shaky grin that left his fangs poking out over his lower lip. Avard felt his face flush. All these fucking feelings. It's awful. How do you cope? Avard couldn't tell if he was joking or not. He found himself smiling and laughing as well. I don't, usually. I mean, you saw how well I deal with emotions. Scott let out a sharp bark of laughter, then winced, glancing down at his wounded chest. Several long slashes down his torso and across his shoulders. His arm, at least, seemed to have healed rather quickly. Only a few residual bruises where Avard had cracked the bones. Shit. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I wasn't. Avard's heart leapt. Blood had started seeping through the stitches across Scott's shoulder, harsh against his pale skin. He tried to wipe it away with his thumb, but Scott stopped him, holding his hand away. It's okay, he murmured, cupping Avard's face. His expression had gone soft again, an uncharacteristic warmth and fondness in his eyes. I'm okay, I'll heal, he repeated. Avard just nodded, too choked up to speak. He could feel tears gathering again. Scott shuffled closer, pulling him over, pressing their foreheads together. Something had changed. Something had changed massively. This wasn't the same Scott he had known. Surely it couldn't be. This was no imposing presence, no untouchable elder vampire. This was just a person. Just Scott. Maybe that was better. He still looked the same, sounded the same. He was still Scott. He was just nicer. It's cold over here. His thoughts were interrupted. Scott moved, turned sideways, and tried to stand. Avard stood as well, just in time to catch him as his legs gave out. They were almost the same height now. Avard had grown a good few inches since last time, now only an inch or so shorter than the elder vampire. Scott glared at him for a moment, then sighed, giving into another soft smile. There's the fireplace. We could, or you could go sit there, Everett suggested sheepishly, hugging his tail under the blanket, using it to lift the fleece over Scott's shoulders. Help me over there? Scott offered in response, adjusting the blanket to lay nicely over him. Everett nodded, maybe a little too eagerly, and the pair made their way around the bed, over to a soft spot on the carpet just before the blazing hearth. Scott sat first, wrapping up tight in the fleece blanket, no longer bleeding as his wounds sealed shut. Everett sat beside him, curling his tail around them both. Having taken the extra comforter off the bed, silence settled between them, warmed by the fire, permeated by a crackling flame and the wind outside. Everett caught himself glancing sideways repeatedly. Scott was watching the fire, a small, relaxed smile on his lips, eyes half closed, calm, gently lit by the wavering firelight, catching on the soft waves of his hair, framing his face neatly. Everett's face started to burn from more than just the heat dancing off the hearth. Scott glanced sideways once and caught him staring. Everett quickly redirected his gaze to the opposite wall, feeling his heartbeat quicken. He heard Scott chuckle lightly, then felt him lean over, resting his head on the demon's shoulder, with a content sigh. I missed you, he heard a quiet whisper, Scott's voice trailing off into calm silence again. Everett glanced at him, sound asleep, leaning on the younger man's shoulder, either unaware or unbothered by his racing heart. Everett picked him up at some point, carefully carrying him back to bed when he was certain the vampire was asleep. He tucked him in, careful not to jostle the half-healed wounds, then paused. Scott's claws latched into the collar of his shirt, preventing him from walking away. His heart skipped a beat when he realized, then almost stopped when he saw Scott's eyes open, staring blearily up at him, almost pleadingly. Slowly, he peeled the blanket back and climbed into the bed beside him, hand shaking. Scott nuzzled up to him immediately, no hesitation. He knew what he wanted, and he was going to get it. Nestled in between Everett's arms, resting against his chest, passed out almost the second he was comfortable. Everett just wrapped his arms around his sire, unable to quiet the gleeful purr that started in his throat. I need to read out the notes for you. Notes. Merry Christmas. Here's your yowie. Truly. That's fun. Okay. That is the end of chapter 2. And then, yeah, we got chapter 3, which is still another very long one because it keeps killing me. Yeah, they're about half an hour. Oh, this one's 27. But like, no, this one is not 27. We just got 27 minutes on the first thing. And then there's like 13 minutes on this one. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed. Sorry, I keep on like getting far from the mic, and then I'm like, no, you need to speak close to the mic for the people to hear you. Anyway, I'm hoping you guys are actually liking this because, again, this is a brand new fandom that I keep spraying on you guys. Nothing lasts very long. Granted, if I had been continuously recording new like one shots or whatever, vampires would have been going probably since latest October. Wait, yeah, October. I know the month of the year. My voice is dead because I've now recorded 2 chapters in one day, which is like 10,000 words. An hour of recording. Why am I killing myself with this? Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, my brother has told me that I need to ask you guys to subscribe, but I don't like doing that. I like asking for comments because I don't care about the numbers. I really absolutely adore seeing comments and seeing you guys' reactions, and like, if you find something funny, if you find something traumatic, if you just want to complain about whatever, I don't care. Just tell me because I like to interact with people. So, yeah. Sorry for rambling. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.